Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire's Business of America podcast with your host, Jerry Rogers.
Welcome to another edition of the Business of America. And I say this again, I say this all the time. This show is going to be important for the public discussion, for the understanding of what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to marry science with innovation, with marketing, with corporate structure, and how to make good things happen. Teddy Roosevelt, the ethos of this program is, of course, the arena, the man in the arena, the woman in the arena. And it's not the critic who counts. That's the thesis here. That's the mission. It's the men and women who roll their sleeves up, who take risks, and who create and who innovate and who create new cures and therapies or new business models. And today we have a real entrepreneur, someone who has engaged in engineering and science and patents. And he is the chairman, the CEO, the co-founder of Masimo. He's and again, today, just a new FDA approved product. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Joe Kiani, welcome to the Business of America.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Jerry. Thanks for doing this program. It's important.
It is, and I tell you what, I'm a kid from the Bronx, and we'll get to where you're from. I'm a kid from the Bronx who was in speech therapy up until sixth grade. And I find it's amazing that we have these opportunities on the radio, on podcasting, to be communicating ideas. And that's what this is. This is about ideas and about the public discussion, how best to have that public discussion. So I'm a kid from the Bronx. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you. Yeah, I was born in Shiraz, Iran, and 1974, my family immigrated to the U.S. I was 9 years old. We actually moved to a tiny town called Albertville, Alabama. And I just came across a newspaper clipping and I didn't realize why they were making this big deal about us there. But it was saying we're the first immigrants to go to that school. And that school that I went to in Albertville, they were so kind. They had after school English lessons for me, my sister, and my mom, who came to them too. And I read how they said, I will say I only knew 3 words when I came to the US. It actually said I knew 2. It was hi and okay. Those are the only 2 words I knew when I came here.
Being an immigrant is, of course, the American story. Everyone. What is that line from Moscow on the Hudson? America is great because everyone is from somewhere else. And my wife's a first generation American. Her parents came over to America after World War II. My grandparents came over in the early part of last century. So your story is an immigrant story. Tell us more about, so you're in Alabama. You are the first immigrant family in this town, in this school system. So how does that work?
In retrospect, I now realize how blessed I was, because not only I was new to the land, but the land was new to me. They had never had an immigrant in that town, in that high school. And they just treated me so well. They just really took our whole family in, and we felt such love and bond. Within 6 months, I could speak the language. I could understand everybody. I still had to do a lot of translations for my homework because some of the words were not used normally. But it was great. It was great. And, I, unfortunately, because we were new to this country, starting at zero. For a while, we lived a really tough life. For a while, we lived in the projects. But one thing that my parents always pushed us on is education. And I think that may have been one of the unique things in our home, in the projects, because that vision of higher education wasn't there for every other kid in that community. And we ended up doing okay. We eventually moved to California, San Diego, and now Orange County. And that's where I started my company.
Wow. So Masimo, we'll get that about the company in a second. I want to know more about your you're an engineer, you're an inventor, you're an ideas guy. Tell me about your first invention, your first patent. Tell me about how that happened. Someone actually put that bug in my ear. Ask him about his first invention. So I'm excited to hear about it.
Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, I think I've got like 900 patent applications. I think
Oh my
500
goodness.
patents.
Wow.
Yeah, so the first invention, I got to tell you, a lot of people think it takes a genius to come up with the inventive ideas. It doesn't. It just, it requires you to know enough about what I call the four squares of a problem. And then you're trying to solve a problem, so you come up with a solution to step out of that square. So my first invention was dealing with how do you solve the motion artifact that causes false alarms with pulse oximeters. Pulse oximeters were these sensors you put on your finger.
Of course.
They shine light through the finger, and they worked great if the person stood still, didn't shiver, didn't wiggle, didn't move. The slightest motion would cause these devices to read off by 20, 30, 40%, causing a lot of problems, which we'll get to later. But yeah, I had studied for my master's program under this brilliant professor, Fred Harris, who taught me adaptive filters, AI. This is back in the early 80s. And I thought I could use this adaptive filter to get rid of this, what we call in-band noise, the noise of my motion in the same
Sure.
window as my heart rate. And that was it. That was my first invention. It worked. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history.
In the 1980s, it sounds to me you were an early Dr. McCoy, Bones McCoy from Star Trek, with figuring out new gadgets. Tell us about Masimo. Tell us about your company.
Yeah, I started Masimo in my garage in 1989. I actually had a condominium with an attached garage, so it's a true statement.
You're like a rock star. You're like a garage band. This is great.
Yeah. Sometimes we felt that way. Most of the time, we felt like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do next?" But yeah, I was 24 when I started Masimo. I got started kind of young. I was 15 when I started college. Got my master's by the time I was 22, and I took a second loan on my condominium. And with $40,000, I started Masimo with the hope and the dream that I could make pulse oximeters reliable and accurate enough so that it could really work for clinicians. It could help babies be monitored at home, and it could one day help to protect people from opioid overdose.
Well, I've worked in the healthcare field for 25 years on the policy side of it, working for think tanks and for pharma, and even now doing work with patient advocacy groups. And we've had a lot of biotech and innovators on this program, men and women who are dealing with rare diseases. One gentleman, FDA approved application for to deal with mental health issues. You're in a space that is constantly in the news. It's constantly being discussed. What are some of your top products? How do you work with hospitals? And I want to ask you about children and infant care too. But let's start with your top products and how you work with hospitals and medical groups.
Well, we revolutionized pulse oximetry. We didn't invent it. What we invented is making pulse oximeters accurate and reliable, even when people moved, even when they had low perfusion or low blood flow. Before that invention, before our product, 70 to 90% of the alarms were false alarms. Babies in the neonatal ICU were getting retinopathy of prematurity. 2,000 a year were going blind.
Wow.
And people were being found dead in bed because they couldn't continuously monitor them because they were moving in the post-surgical ward with opioids given to them. So we revolutionized pulse ox. We are now the leaders in pulse oximetry. Not only the top 10 of 10 hospitals, as reported in U.S. News, primarily use Masimo, but over 200 million patients are monitored with our pulse oximeter technology every year. And we have taken that and moved on. We are serial innovators. We invented what now we call pulse co-oximetry. So instead of just oxygen, we have this new 12 LED technology called Rainbow that helps us to measure hemoglobin, carbon monoxide, CO poisoning. We also went and took AI and applied it to hospital automation to help clinicians figure out problems with their patient before it's too late. And finally, telemonitoring. During COVID, we were there helping hospitals send patients with COVID home that didn't require ICU care, remotely monitor them, and only bring them in when they needed ICU care. And it was a lifesaver. A study showed it reduced mortality by 70% and saved $11,000 a patient. So that's the four major pieces of technologies we have. And we're now a $2 billion publicly traded company, and but still a lot more to come.
9 out of 10 top hospitals, 200 million patients. Speak a little bit about your children and babies going blind, and how your devices, your technology has helped in that area.
Yeah, when we started Masimo, my vision was to make pulse oximeters so reliable it could go home with parents to monitor their babies for SIDS. It could help hospitals monitor patients for opioids. But clinicians came up with their own inventions on how to use our technology. Dr. Augusto Sola, who was the head of neonatology at Cedars, said, look, I think retinopathy prematurity happens because of these pulse oximeters under reading when the babies are wiggling, and the clinicians increasing the oxygen in the incubator in order to save their brain, but it's damaging their eye. And he was right. Now that we had our technology, he showed that he could reduce retinopathy from 12% rate to 0. And I got to tell you, I'm so proud of this. 2,000 babies in America were going blind every year. And now this technology has been out in the NICUs for over 20 years. I'm telling you, there's now 40,000 people that aren't blind.
Wow.
You know, we're talking like 350,000 years of eyesight that we've given. And not to mention the babies who needed thick Coca-Cola bottle glasses or needed laser surgeries, virtually eliminated thanks to our accurate pulse oximeters.
You know, I want to say something to our audience, because this is a constant theme through our programs, and that is we don't know sometimes the issues, the health crises that others are going through, the rare disease, or in this instance, I'll be honest with you, Joe, I've never even thought about this issue of babies going blind because of the technology wasn't good enough, and you come along, and this is why your company, again. 200 million patients, 9 out of 10 top hospitals, $2 billion. But you're creating 21st century medicine. You're building innovation on top of innovation. And there are patients that don't know they need your technology yet. And yet you're building that new technology. I want to ask you about opioids, but I also want to ask you about how does this all work? Because I mean, how does your sales force work with your engineers, with your scientists? Because that's important, because I think it's unique. Again, I've interviewed CEOs and innovators and scientists and some of the top thinkers and innovators in the health field. And this is a very unique story here. But before we get to that story, tell me about how your interventions, your technologies is dealing with this opioid crisis. Look, I'm in DC, not in DC right now, but I work in and out of DC. I've been in public policy, in and out of public policy for 25 years. The opioid crisis is one that no one seems to be able to wrap their heads around. We can't even get agreement on policy on this issue. How are you dealing your aspect or your sliver of the opioid crisis?
Well, look, that was one of the things I really thought we could help, because I knew pulse oximeters, if they could work reliably on people that weren't still, because they weren't anesthetized, it could help tell people when they're about to die of opioid overdose. Because what happens? Opioids get rid of the pain. One of the reasons we breathe, because when we don't breathe, the CO2 increases in our body and it gets painful, so we breathe. So when someone takes opioids and goes to sleep, they may never wake up because they'll stop breathing. And when they stop breathing, oxygen saturation from our pulse oximeters will start dropping from 100 to 90, 80, 70, and we can alarm and wake them. So
Wow.
here's what we did. We decided to take this technology that was being proven in hospitals to do just that. In fact, Dartmouth Hitchcock did a 10-year study showing that nobody died, nobody had brain damage with the group that had our technology. But the group that didn't have our technology, they had deaths, they had brain damage. And by using our technology, they saved $7 million a year because they didn't send these patients back to the ICU as often. They didn't have to do rapid response team activation as often. So we took that hospital technology and we shrunk it, turned it into a wearable that you can put on your finger with a wrist strap with 5-day battery life, and it could then send your alarm Bluetooth to your phone or a hub we put in the house that goes to the cloud. And if you're having a desaturation event, it sends it to people who take care of you. And if they don't respond, it sends it to the nearest ambulance with your location. And this product, we just got FDA approval a year ago. The first of its kind, nothing like this out there. The FDA actually granted us breakthrough status, chose us as one of 8 products out of 250 that could help the opioid epidemic. And we hope to take the 100,000 lives lost every year to opioids to 0 with this technology. We call it opioid halo.
This is amazing. I've worked with the former Health and Human Services Secretary, Interim Secretary, and Deputy Secretary Eric Hargan, and this has been an issue for him. That even out of office, he has been continue to work on this. I'd love to, Joe, and I'm doing a little business as we record. I'd love for you and Eric Hargan to get together and share with him your technology here, so he can go out and just educate the public discussion on this. And again, I don't mean to sound syrupy or overboard, but this is miraculous. This is science, but there's
I would love to meet him. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so let me ask you this. So I've worked in this this area for years. How do you make it all work? Well, 2-part question. What's the future look like? And then also, how do you get this to work? How do you get the science side, the engineering side to work with the sales side or the folks who interact with the hospitals and with the public and with the payer and all the rest? I mean, so the future. Please say the future looks bright, because we need it. But you tell me about the future, and then we'll talk about the structure and how you make it all work.
The future does look bright. Look,
Thank God.
we come up with problems as humanity, and we solve those problems. Remember how people used to die, and someone invented soap. So we're going to solve all these problems, and that's why we are where we are. But I got to tell you how it all comes together with great people. If you have a strong core, this is to other entrepreneurs who are watching this thing. I'm the average Joe that basically says persistence, persistence, persistence. That's what pays off. But the other thing I've tried to do always is hire people a lot better than me in every area: engineering, sales, marketing, manufacturing, finance. Because at the end of the day, it's not that hard. Companies, what do? We make products, we sell products. Great companies make great products and have great sales forces selling their products. So doing this, having this passion for helping patients has really given me the blessing of bringing some incredible team members in from all walks of life that have come in here to help make it happen. And that's how we do it.
So we're going to have folks, this audience is business people, entrepreneurs. It's members of Congress. It's the media who watch it. I want to just, if you don't mind, I'm going to stick on this for a second, because I think a lot of good companies, I think a lot of good ideas, especially innovative ideas, thinking about what's next around the curve, it's easy to figure out what's already happened. Yeah, I could figure out something for a challenge that we've already experienced. It seems to me you're working on what's the next challenge. And this is very unique and maybe why you've been so successful. But I want to emphasize this. I think the structure, how you're managing this is part of the success. I mean, again, am I naive? I mean, how is it that you've been, again, you said that the 80s. I know for some people the 80s seems like it's not that long ago that you were that 24-year-old young man in that garage, and here we are some years later, and you're still innovating, and you're still hiring good people. You're still bringing the team together. Talk to me about the team, because I know that in any success I've had in my life, my marriage, my team is my wife and my kids, and my pastors and this sort of thing. In my work life, my team, my editors, and those who I trust, in my policy work, it's the best experts that come in who make me look better. I like what you said. You look for people who are better than you, or can bring something you can't bring. Talk about that, because that is unique. Usually the CEO wants to make sure he's always the best in the room, the smartest at the table. But you seem comfortable in letting other folks kind of succeed and bring success. Talk about that. How you do. Talk about how you do that, and especially in what we think about CEOs.
Yeah, well, unless you're, I guess, really doing rock and roll, you can't do anything by yourself.
Well, even rock and roll with the greatest bands, right? The greatest bands had to play together. So, but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're right. Even you've seen that where great bands kind of break up. They're not as good as they used to be when they were together.
Right.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, I look for purists. What do I mean by that? I look for people who love what they do, and the money is secondary to them. So I just have to make sure I'm taking care of them, because they won't take care of themselves. They really are just passionate about what they do, whatever their chosen field is, whether it's engineering, science, whether it's sales, whether it's finance, whether it's operations. You got to look for people who just love what they do. Kind of like you were telling me how you get up 5 a.m. and you work till 10 at night. And you got to be obsessed with it.
Yes. And I do love what I do. I look, I think what you're doing, what I'm doing, even this conversation, what a privilege it is to talk about how to advance new cures, new therapies, how to make others aware of it. I'm surprised. I am steeped in the healthcare field. And, I've just learned about your company recently. Where are you? You're based in California. I think you said California, right?
Irvine, California.
And so what is your outreach like? What is your external affairs like? How do you get the word out in terms of your products and this sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think if you can get your core executive team to know what you're trying to do, and they can hopefully get the rest of the circle, the sales, the engineers, the marketing, manufacturing team to know what you're trying to do, then hopefully they'll get the world to know what you're trying to do. So it's really just this getting out, the ripples, the rings of knowledge. And I got to tell you something you said earlier, Jerry. I don't mean to be saucy either, but one thing, whether it was an invention or whether it's a vision for the future, like you said earlier, we're not just looking backwards. We kind of feel like we know where we got to go. You sometimes feel like somebody else is putting that thought in your head. It's not your own. So like somebody up there is saying, you got to go do this. And sometimes I have to tell you, the vision is as clear as day to me of what has to get done, even though it's sometimes 10 to 15 years away from getting done. And the hardest job I have to do is to share that vision with my team. So they get it, they understand it, and then they go make me look like a visionary
Sure.
instead of someone who's delusional. So yeah, that's really that's the wonderful thing that I think people have different skills, people have different abilities, and I've been fortunate to not only kind of think about where things are going to go, but also some of these inventions. It just feels like it just it comes to you. You know,
Yeah. Well, let me ask you
kind of
about
funny.
this. And again, we're coming to the end of the program, but I mean, I had a mentor, a guy named Fred Smith, who was at a think tank called the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and he said something to me when I was a young man about trusting your gut. You have a vision, you have an idea, go with it. And you're saying that some of your ideas, some of your gut instincts take 10, 15 years before you see that success. Talk about the risks you've taken, because you can't be the man in the arena. You can't be the man or the woman in the arena and not be willing to take risks. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. Some people think taking risks is because you're looking for a big reward. I think taking risks helps you live. I remember seeing the story of Alive about these people who crashed into the Mount Andes, and the people that did the risk, they got up and they left the plane. They unfortunately ate flesh of another human who had died. Those are the people that survived. And oh my God, have we taken risks? Do we believe in risk taking as the basis of not just thriving, but of survival? Absolutely. And whether it was leaving what I knew how to make money at, starting my own company with a loan, and trust me, the first 7 years, I didn't take any vacation. I think I took 2 4-day weekends, other than when I got sick, working like you from the morning till when I fell asleep. Walking away from deals that seemed wrong, out of principle, walking away. I got to tell you, every time I made moves out of principle, it ended up being the best thing for me and for what I was trying to do. So I think risk taking is not just something you should consider; it's required to survive.
In order to be a successful entrepreneur, what I'm learning from the men and women who I've interviewed is it's a prerequisite. You have to be willing to take risks. And that doesn't mean that you are careless. Sometimes taking care means taking that risk. And I don't think anyone, I mean, either simple or great, no one does anything that changes lives, that moves things forwards without taking a risk. Getting married is a risk. Having children, that's a risk. I mean, your first job, it's a risk. Going to school. Did you say you graduated college at 15? Even that,
I started college at 15.
Oh, you started 15. But even that's a risk, Are you ready for it? I mean, these are all risks. It seems that you've been taking risks for a long time. You know what it is? It's the immigrant stock. It's to think about how your family took that risk coming to a new country. That's the greatest entrepreneurial risk I think there is, but leaving everything behind and coming and starting new. My goodness, you've done it with your company. You've taken that heritage, the legacy of being an immigrant, being in a new country, learning English in 6 months, and you've turned that into something that is saving lives and enhancing lives. And I don't want, I could go on forever, but before I do let you go, what did I miss? How can our audience, those who write about medical technology and those who are engaged in this field, find out more about your journey here, your success, but also about your company?
Well, thank you so much for doing this program, Jerry. Thanks for having me on it. I got to tell you, one key takeaway is we have really built this incredible team. It reminds me of the 1990s Bulls in Chicago.
I would have said the 1998 Yankees, but that's okay though.
Okay, well, maybe that one too, but I watched the Bulls.
All right.
And I got to tell you, that's what we have. And this team, there's so much more we have to deliver that'll not only help patients, but when we help patients, we help our stockholders. So we got to keep this incredible team together. It would be such a shame if it just disperses. And also, for people to understand the next evolution in healthcare is home. We need to give people the ability, because we have now all the foundation to better care for themselves at home.
If I had a dinger right now, I'd be ringing the bell, because you're 100. There's that vision again. The future of healthcare is home care. It's telehealth care. It's using technology. In fact, some of the biggest discussions on Capitol Hill today is how do we make it easier for patients to get access to care from home. This is a big issue, and you're at the forefront of it, and in a way that a lot of folks who are engaged in policy on this issue haven't thought of. But Joe, this has been my pleasure, and this is exactly why we do the show. You're in the arena, and you're taking risks, and you're doing well. Don't listen to the critics. Keep on moving forward.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed meeting you. Thank you.
Me too, Joe.
Please connect with your friend. I love.
Yes, I will. Of course, Eric Hart. I will do that. Hey, for the rest of you, was I right or was I right 30 minutes ago? This was a great show. This is the business of America. Tune in next week for another episode. Thanks.
This has been the Federal Newswire's Business of America podcast, hosted by Jerry Rogers. Check out the Federal Newswire's family of websites, as well as their social media stream.